Good morning and welcome to another broadcast. Thank you again so much for joining us. Um, Once again, I'm Sheryl Thomas. I am the local youth president here at Church of God, the Bible Way. And again, thank you all so much for joining us. We are going to jump right into our broadcast. Our topic, this is part two of the topic, parents, don't let your children bully you. I'm going to say that again. Parents, don't let your children bully you. I just want to kind of do a recap of some of the things that we discussed on the last broadcast. One of the things we talked about was we defined the term bullying. We talked about the different types of children who bully their parents, and then we talked about the consequences of the child who's bullying and the parent who's being bullied. So today, what we're going to discuss here today is I want parents to know your role and your responsibility as parents. Another thing that we're going to focus on here today is establishing and maintaining boundaries. And then the last thing that we are going to talk about is being consistent as well as persistent. Parents, it's very important that, as parents, we know what our roles and responsibilities are. A lot of times, oftentimes, when we're, dealing with our children, because they're our children, we just expect them to know what we expect. And that's not always true. So, it is very important for, as parents, that for us to know what our roles and our responsibilities are as parents. And I'm just going to go over a few things here with you today as far as role and responsibilities as parents. As a parent, we are responsible for providing an environment that is safe, and that environment should not only be physically safe. When it comes to our young children, we teach them, don't touch the hot stove or don't touch the hot iron. We teach them, not to put anything in the socket. So it's not just involving physical safety, but it's also involving emotional as well as mental safety as well. So we bear the responsibility as parents, making sure that our kids, they are safe. We want to keep them free from sexual and, like I said, emotional abuse. We want to keep them from unsafe objects, in and around our home. So that's one of our responsibilities as parents. Another responsibility is to provide for their basic needs. We make sure that they eat, not just eat, but eating a healthy, well-balanced meal. We want to make sure that they getting plenty of water, shelter. Parents, I think sometimes we take it for, we take certain things for granted. We're living in what I like to call a microwave generation. We want everything quickly, everything instant. But it's very important that we are, when we're talking about providing for our children's basic needs. It's very important for us to teach them. Again, just in their eating habits, eating healthy. A lot of times what is happening, and I want everybody to keep in mind that we're talking about not being bullied, and I'm going somewhere when I'm talking about our responsibilities as parents. Sometimes what I see in my line of work is that when the child's basic needs are not being met, then that produces an environment for that child to become that bully. That gives that child, and I shouldn't say it gives them an excuse, but the child sometimes use not being properly taken care of, their needs not being properly met, as an excuse to treat their parents in and every kind of way that gives that child. And again, I'm stressing that it's not an excuse for that child, but in that child's mind, is that child's perception, it gives them, they feel that it gives them the right to treat the parent the way that they're treating them. So that's why I'm going over parents' responsibilities and roles. It's very important that we provide for their self-esteem. We want to make sure that we're contributing to them having a positive self-esteem, having a healthy self-esteem. So those are some of the roles and responsibilities as a parent. We want to teach them morals and values. We want to teach them right from wrong. Again, we want to be the model for our children. We want to. Something very interesting came up after my broadcast yesterday. I had a young man, one of our yams, he asked, he said, well, what about those parents who are bullying their kids? We have to model. It's very important that we model. That's a whole nother topic in and of itself. And I know that's going to be for a later broadcast, so I'm not going to cover that today, but I want to stress how it is important for us to model appropriate behaviors. It's very important that we don't allow our children to put us, that we don't become combative, and we don't allow our children to put us in a situation that produces to bring us out of character, so to speak. So we want to teach them to be honest. We want to teach them to be respectful. We want to teach them to be responsible. One of the things that I was sharing on yesterday is, I remember when, my youngest was, she was younger, and I had an older lady, because I was, telling her to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I had an older lady tell me, well, you don't have to say that. You don't have to tell her to, that's that slave mentality. But we want to teach them how to be respectful. We want to teach them how to be compassionate. We want to teach them, patience. We want to teach them forgiveness. Again, these are as parents, we have responsibilities. We have duties to pour into our children. And when we're pouring into our children, it reduces the likelihood of them, attempting or engaging in bullying behaviors with us as parents. We want to provide discipline, and this is my next point that I want to make. We want to make sure that we are providing structure. We want to make sure that we are not only consistent, but we want to make sure that we're persistent, and we also want to make sure we're fair. I want to stress that no two, no three children they are the same. So what a discipline that may works for one child may not necessarily work for another child. So we want to be fair, but we want to also understand that one form of discipline may not work if you have multiple children. It may not work for all of those children the same. So in being persistent and being consistent and in providing structure, you also want to make sure that you are fair. So the next thing that I want to talk about is establishing and maintaining boundaries. Boundaries are basically it's just setting limits, and it's critically important that we set limits, that we set boundaries that are clear, we set boundaries that are precise. It's very important that our children, they know what those boundaries are. It is very important that they understand that they're not going to talk to us in a kind of way. They're not going to treat their siblings or talk to their siblings in a kind of way. So I'm going to go over a few things here. Parents, it's very important for us to remember that, we are the parents and not the child. And it's important that those roles are not reversed. And, I'm going to stress this. It's important for us to remember that we are the parent. It's critically important that we not allow our children their defiance, their manipulative behaviors. It is very important that we do not allow that to make us guilty, or it's very important that we do not allow that to cause the child to dictate what the rules and the boundaries are going to be. So remember that you are the parent. Even though your child may be defiant, your child may be manipulative, your child may be disrespectful, it's very important, parents, that you do not allow those behaviors to control you. It's very important that you do not allow those behaviors to, again, dictate whether or not you're going to uphold those boundaries. A lot of times, again, kids, kids, they know what they can do, they know what they can say, to in order to get what they want. But it's very important for, as parents, that you do not allow the child manipulative or defiant behaviors to control or dictate what it is that child wants. um, don't. It's very important that we not give in to our children's negative demands. Uh, it's very important, and I went over this a few minutes ago, for you to remember you are responsible for keeping that child safe. You are responsible for keeping that child safe on every hand, and even when that child, again, and I really want to, because this is something that I see on my job. A lot of times, a child will make every attempt to make the parent feel guilty just to get what they want. So it's very important for us to understand that we are responsible for keeping them safe, for meeting their basic needs, and helping them, and helping to guide and shape them to become the adults or productive members of society. I want to go over, again, boundaries. Parental boundaries allow kids to be safe. So it's very important, again, that we are setting boundaries that are clear, that are concise, that are precise. It's very important that we let our children know up front what our expectations are. It's very important that we let our children know, if you expect your child to be in at a certain time, let them know that up front. With little children, if you expect them, when they get up from the table, for them to push their chair in, for them to, empty their, put their trash in the trash can, let them know that up front. It's very important that we are clear and concise about what we expect our children to do. Secure boundaries set by the parent. With my kids, a lot of times, when they were younger, especially when it came to consequences, I would allow them to, I would allow them to participate. And we would, as a family, we would say, okay, these are the boundaries. What do you think some of the rules should be? What do you think, so your expectations should be? And so, as a family, we would outline some things together. And then I would also ask, what do you think some of the consequences should be? Again, as a family, we should outline them together. We would outline them together. One of the things that I would do is when my children were younger, because they're adults now, but when they were younger, I would say, if they got into trouble or they did something they weren't supposed to do, I would say to them, what do you think their consequences? What do you think your consequences should be? A lot of times, their consequences, they would identify something a lot more strict, tougher than I would, or their dad would say. So when those were set in place, those boundaries, those expectations, we adhered to them. And so once you set those boundaries in place, it is very important. Now there are times where that may call for you to be. I won't necessarily. I don't want to necessarily use the word lenient, but you may deviate a little bit forward, but from what has been set in place. But again, I think that's on a case by case situation. But it's very important that the boundaries that are set, you want to make sure that the child feels safe. You want to make sure that you as a parent, you want to make sure you're safe. Children, one of the things that I want to look at is how, when we set boundaries, and this is one of the things that I get sometimes. A parent will set a boundary. They'll tell the child, okay, I expect you to be in at such and such time. And if you don't be in at this time, this is going to be a consequence. Well, what the child does, they break it. And when it comes to administering the consequences, there are no consequences. The parents say, well, if you do it again, this is what's going to happen. It happens again, there are no consequences. Well, what that individual is learning, is being taught, is there nothing is going to happen to them. So, it's very important that when we establish those boundaries, it's very important that we understand those boundaries, the consequences for those boundaries. We have to adhere to whatever we put in place. Setting boundaries, decide. It's very important that we decide where the line is. When you draw the line, and again, I understand that as a parent, there may, there may be times where it calls for some flexibility, but you can't keep moving that line. You keep moving that line, it's going to only create problems in the home. So you want to definitely, you want to set limits that, again, if they exceed those limits, they want to understand. We want our children to understand up front what the consequences are for those limits. They're always, I'm talking about consequences, but when setting boundaries, you not only want to have consequences, but you also, you want to have a reward system. So if they're adhering to, what it is they're doing or the boundaries that have been set in place, you want to make sure that you reward them for that. I think a lot of times we look at what a child is not doing versus what a child is doing, and again, that is something that creates, a lot of conflict, because I even my own children, they said, well, you always say when they were young, I would say, they would tell me, well, you always say what I'm not doing, or what I'm doing wrong. And so, I had to make a conscious effort to look at, okay, what it is, or highlighting when they were doing something good. So very important for, us to not only look at the consequences, but also, reward them for when they are making the right decisions. Setting boundaries, as parents, I want to say that, we're not always right. And so it's very important for us to, be trustworthy with our kids. We want to be able to, we want our kids to be able to, come to us, not just when things are going good, but when things are going bad. And so we want to establish an environment that's trustworthy. We want to establish an environment where our kids, they know that we have their backs. I keep saying this, and I'm going to go back to this, because when we're establishing boundaries, it's important to be precise. It's important for us to communicate what our expectations are up front. It's important for, a lot of times, one of the things, and I remember, I can't remember which one of my kids. Maybe it was. I don't think it was all of them, but I can't remember which one. But I know there were a couple of them, at least two of them, that when it came to technology, because there was, and we outlined up front what we expected them when it came to their phones, and so I know that there was at least one case, one situation where we had to draw up a contract, but that contract it showed that the child up front. It showed, our child up front, this is what is expected of you, and if you violate this contract, this is what's going to happen. Again, I said this earlier. It's important for us to recognize those appropriate behaviors. A lot of times, what we focus on is the negative, but it's important for us to recognize the appropriate behaviors. This is one that's real big for me, and I think that when I was on. A while back, I highlighted this. Parents, I don't believe in calling kids bad, and I think that we should avoid labeling our children as being bad. I strongly believe that our good kids, they make bad choices. Yes, I'll say that again. I strongly believe that our good kids make bad choices. So, avoid from labeling, placing a label on your child. One of the things that I see is that, I've heard teens say to their parents, well, you call me bad, so therefore I'm gonna, I'm gonna act bad, and that sets, a child, they hear that for so long, and they begin to act out what it is they're hearing, and it creates the perfect storm for the children to not just be bad or engage in bad. I say be bad, but engage in bad behaviors. But it creates a scenario, a situation for them to do it towards their parents, thus creating that bullying situation. So with at all costs, avoid labeling, avoid using the term bad when it comes to your kids. Again, in establishing boundaries, I want you to. It's very important that you know the limits. You know your limits, and as well as your values. You want to listen. It's very important that we're able to listen to our children. And teach them. We have to model for them. So when I'm saying listen to them, also, model when they're talking, to be able to model. We want to model what listening looks like. So if they're trying to talk, because we expect them to listen to us, and so if they're attempting to talk or share something, we want to model what that listening looks like. We want to be able to. We not only do we want to be able to listen to our emotions and feelings, but we want to teach that to them. So if we're feeling, or if our children are showing us disrespect, if our children are showing us bullying behavior, we don't want to become the bully. We don't want to put out what it is that they're expressing. We want to be able to model something that's different. We want to be able to, as parents, it's very important for us to value ourselves, value our own needs. Again, this is the modeling behavior that we want to show our children, because when to reduce the likelihood of our children becoming bullying, we have to be able to model. I keep going back to this, because one of the things that I'm seeing is a lot of times we're not setting up clear, precise boundaries, so our kids are confused. We're saying, we're telling our kids, to be disrespectful, to use this type of tone, to not do this and to not do that. But then they're seeing something totally different with us. Sometimes, and this is not in all situations, this is not in all cases, but sometimes our kids, they become the bullies because as parents, that's what we're doing. We are being the bully. I think I shared on the last broadcast about this young man who was in my office. Listen, he shared with me, and he said it in front of his dad. When he was small, his dad produced. He was fearful of his dad because of the way that his dad treated him and his brother. He said that they were fearful of him. He talked about how his dad would belittle, how his dad would, and he used the term beat. He talked about this, but then he was like beating his chest. He was like, "Now I'm not a kid anymore." Now, and he was just as big as his dad, and he said, I'm just as I'm as big as you are now, and now I'm no longer afraid of you." And the dad admitted that he had become afraid of his son, but the son was basically saying that you created this, you caused this. And so parents, we have to be very careful that we don't create the bullying behaviors in our children. This young man, he clearly stated, even though the parent, the dad, he really didn't admit to a lot of what the child was saying. He did admit that he was fearful, or he was being bullied by his son. But when I listen to the son again, it sounds like some of those behaviors were created by that dad. So we have to be careful that we're not creating these characteristics or these traits in our children. It's very important in establishing boundaries. Communication is key. Parents, I cannot stress enough. Establishing the boundaries, we have to communicate. We cannot expect our children to just automatically know what they are to do if we're not communicating that to them. Parents, especially parents of young children, you can talk with them. You set up those boundaries, when they're young, and when they break those, or when they exceed those boundaries, when they break the rules, you want to make sure that you're consistent in your discipline. You want to make sure that you consistently, that you're not letting them get away with it. So communication is key. Don't think that because a child is 2 or 3 years old that they don't understand what you're communicating, because they do. You may have to, you may not be able to say things to a 2-year-old like you would a 13-year-old, but they do understand. So those boundaries have to be established. Don't wait till they get 8. Don't wait till they get 10. Don't wait till they become a teenager to try to put boundaries in place. Put boundaries in place when they are young. Some of those things, one of the things that one of the things about boundaries, you may have to move the boundaries. So when they're 2, or when they're 6 months, 10 months, a year old, whereas you're keeping them, from the stove, or you're keeping them from the iron. You put your boundaries are you're tougher when they become 12. They know that the stove is hot. They know that the iron is hot. They know. So where you may be, while you may be changing some things or modifying some things, you want to make sure that those boundaries, those expectations are still in place. Last thing that I'm going to touch on here today is you definitely want to be consistent. Consistency is, the key. When your child becomes, when she or he is yelling or screaming, when you see the defiance, when you see the manipulation, don't back down from it. If your rule is you don't yell at me, you don't change from that. If your rule is you are, I said this earlier, you are to be home at a certain time, you don't change from that. If your rule is if you're running late, you call me, you don't change from it. You got to be consistent. When we're dealing with younger kids, part of that consistency is a routine. Making sure they understand, getting up, at a, don't again, I don't want to go off into a whole different topic, but just a routine of making sure that they are up at a appropriate time, making sure that they are washing their face or brushing their teeth, making sure that they have a well balanced meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Make sure that they're engaged appropriately. You want to set those boundaries up in place when they're young, and you want to be consistent with it. I know that sometimes we have to deviate from it, from certain things, but consistency is going to be the key. Parents, it's very, very important for us to understand that when our children, we mold them, we shape them, and we shape them into what the direction that we want them to go in. And when they act out, when they do things that is contrary to what they are expected to do, we want to make sure that that we are being consistent in our discipline, we're being fair in our discipline. Again, we can't become relaxed, because that creates a situation for them to take advantage of us. As parents, we have to be parents and not allow our kids to parent us. Again, don't allow your kid to dictate when they're going to come, when they're going to go. Don't allow your kids to dictate what it is that they're going to do, what it is they're not going to do. You are the parent, and it's very important that you be the parent. It's very important that we establish boundaries when they are young. I cannot stress that enough. It's very important. When they become older and we try to put certain things in place that we have not always been doing, we're going to get that kickback. So parents, I just want to encourage each and every one of you, again, don't allow your children to bully you. You be the parent. You are the parent. Set those boundaries. Be consistent. Be persistent. Let them know, communicate with them. Let them know what you expect. Thank you all so much for tuning in again today. I hope that I've said something that will help you all. Again, the goal here is, you don't want your kids to bully you. You be the parent. take back your authority. Take back, your position as being, who God has designed you to be. You are the parent. Again, I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in here today. You all enjoy the rest of your day, and